Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining the session on the new Communication on Progress, Introduction to the Environment section. My name is Bernard Frey. I'm Senior Manager on SDG Impact and Reporting at the UN Global Compact. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues at the COP team and also by Mylan Ha and Anna Krupp, which are our water and climate change experts at the UN Global Compact. This session will be recorded and can be accessed on demand on the Academy platform of the UN Global Compact, along with other sessions. Please direct all questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Questions that will not be answered today will be answered in writing in a follow-up to the session. Our aim for today is to provide context and information about the environment section of the Communication on Progress questionnaire, as well as to answer your questions. Please note that the overall structure and content of the questionnaire have been introduced in similar sessions on the governance, human rights, and labor sections that we have hosted previously. If you attended those sessions, please bear with us for a few minutes before we deep dive into the environment section. The questionnaire of the Communication on Progress is organized in 5 sections: governance, human rights, labor, environment, anti-corruption. The governance section provides a cross-cutting overview of the company's sustainability governance structure and processes, while the remaining 4 sections go into greater detail on topics connected to the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. Within each section of the questionnaire, the questions are grouped in different subsections as they typically address the processes and policies that demonstrate a company's commitment to advance sustainability topics connected to the 10 principles, efforts undertaken to prevent or mitigate negative social and environmental impact, performance indicators, and remediation and reporting mechanisms to address grievances and reflect on lessons learned. I would like you to recall that questions in the governance section of the questionnaire refer to processes and structures that also help companies address environmental issues. For instance, the governance section contains questions that ask if the company has publicly stated policies, risk assessment processes, and formal structures to address environmental issues. You can access the recording on the governance section of the questionnaire, as well as other sessions on the UN Global Compact Academy platform. The environment section has also overlaid with the human rights and labor sections of the Communication on Progress, and many questions in the different sections mirror one another. This format helps companies consider and compare differences in action and progress across sustainability topics. Most questions in the environment section will be answered by all participating companies of the UN Global Compact. For questions or environmental topics that the company does not consider material, it can choose answer options such as not applicable or other. The second part of the environment section is tailored to specific industry sectors in order to allow companies to disclose additional information on their material environmental topics. This design allows for increased relevancy of the questionnaire for each participating company and improved efficiency of the completion process. We will see more details on this over the next slides. The environment section of the Communication on Progress questionnaire contains a set of 14 questions that must be answered by all participating companies. Additionally, as mentioned before, there are some questions that are tailored to specific sectors, and only companies operating in those will have to answer them. As we have seen before, the general questions address topics around commitment, prevention, performance, and response remediation and reporting. Within the commitment subsection, companies will be asked about their policy commitments related to environmental topics. E1 asks about specific policy commitments relating to 7 environmental topics: climate change, water, oceans, forest biodiversity, land use, air pollution, waste, and energy and resource use. A policy commitment should explain how the company understands its responsibility to address environmental issues. It is a way for the company to set clear expectations and provide guidance for those who need to adhere to or implement the policy, such as the company's own workforce, its suppliers, and other business partners. It should be approved at the highest levels of the organization to signal the seriousness of the commitment. If the company selects yes, included within a broader policy or as a standalone policy, the organization will be prompted to answer question E11 to provide further detail about the extent of the policy. In order to remain effective and relevant, policies should be reviewed on a consistent basis. If the company has a policy commitment, a link or supporting document can be included, and if not, additional information can be provided in the text box. An organization can also select the option not applicable if the topic is not material to the business. If not applicable is selected, the company will be asked to provide further information. E11 seeks further detail on the nature of the organization's environmental policies. For instance, if they are approved at the most senior level of the company and/or aligned with international standards. The company will also be asked if the policies apply to its own operations or also to the broader value chain. The value chain includes not only suppliers, but also consumers, communities, and other business relationships. The company can select this option if their policies apply to part of the value chain, for instance, certain suppliers or certain consumers, and then briefly provide additional information in the text box about which relationships are covered. Within the subsection on prevention, the environment questions aim to address 4 key topics: engagement with stakeholders, prevention or mitigation of risks, progress assessment, assessment of preventative or mitigative measures, and provision of remedy. This question addresses stakeholder engagement, which enhances outcomes on environmental topics by incorporating a broad set of perspectives on an issue. Affected stakeholders are individuals who have been or may be affected by a company's operations, products, or services, and can include customers, employees, suppliers, and communities. Engaging with them or their representatives is a key part of truly understanding environmental impacts and developing solutions to address them. In their assessment, business enterprises should pay special attention to any particular impacts on individuals from groups or populations that may be at heightened risk of vulnerability or marginalization, and bear in mind the different risks that may be faced by women and men. Wherever possible, businesses should consult affected stakeholders directly in a manner that takes into account language and other potential barriers to effective engagement. Organizations can select no engagement on this topic in instances where an environmental topic is not material to the organization and can provide additional information regarding their selection in the space provided. Once a company has established a policy and conducted appropriate risk and impact assessments, it should take the necessary steps to stop, prevent, or mitigate any negative impacts. There are a variety of ways for a company to do so, such as conducting an audit, participating in collective action, or collaborating with governmental or regulatory bodies. Companies also have the option to detail other actions they're taking by selecting the other option and providing additional information in the space provided. They can select the answer no action within reporting period if they have not yet implemented any activity or if the specific environmental topic is not material to them. Question E4 asks how the company assesses progress in preventing or mitigating risks. An organization should track and monitor its effort to learn if its policies and processes are being implemented optimally and to drive continuous improvement. Organizations may respond with other in order to customize this response and will be prompted to provide further information. If you respond that you set annual targets in E4, follow-up questions E41 and E42 will appear. These questions ask for brief details regarding your environmental targets and how progress towards them is tracked, respectively. Even with sound policies and practices in place, a business may still cause or contribute to an adverse environmental impact that it has not foreseen or been able to prevent. Where a business enterprise identifies such a situation, whether through its due diligence process or other means, its responsibility to respect human rights and protect the environment requires active engagement in remediation, by itself or in cooperation with other actors. This question asks about potential solutions to adverse impacts generated by a company. Here, remedy means to counteract or make good a negative impact. This question also allows you to answer choose to not disclose. If you select this option, you will need to provide a brief explanation. If no adverse impacts have been identified and/or caused, and therefore no remedy needs to be provided, a company may select no adverse impact identified or caused. For consultancies, providing remedy would only apply if an organization itself has caused or contributed to the adverse impact associated with the environmental issues, not if you're advising clients in remediating adverse impacts caused by them. Questions related to the subsection performance are more quantitative in nature and address the topics greenhouse gas emissions, R&D investment, climate adaptation, renewable energy, and low carbon products and services. Question E6 asks companies to disclose their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions and provide additional details about those emissions. The world needs to achieve net zero emissions by mid-century, and tracking and reporting emissions helps expedite emission reduction efforts in line with global targets as set in the Paris Agreement. It can also further help businesses manage risks and opportunities. Scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy. Scope 3 emissions are all indirect emissions, not included in Scope 2, that occur in the value chain of the reporting company, including both upstream and downstream emissions. This question asks organizations to select the proportion of greenhouse gas emissions tracked as either full, meaning all emissions are accounted for, or partial, implying the measurement only covers a fraction of the emissions, which applies only to Scope 3 emissions, or none, to signify that greenhouse gas emissions are not measured. If the organization selects none, it will be prompted to provide further explanation. If greenhouse gas emissions are measured in whole or in part, organizations will be asked to report the emissions in tons of CO2 equivalent. For measurement methodology for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, please refer to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. Question E61 will appear if companies respond partial regarding Scope 3 emissions in question E6. Scope 3 emissions can be difficult to accurately measure, and many companies report partial emissions. These sections aim to capture further details about the reported Scope 3 emissions in order to make the data more transparent and comparable. Businesses play a key role in the development and dissemination of new technologies, and question E7 aims to reflect research and development, R&D, surrounding low-carbon products and services. While there is no precise and generally accepted definition of low-carbon products and services, it can be loosely defined as a product or service that leads to an absolute reduction in greenhouse gas emissions or reduced carbon intensity of an activity. The list on the left should assist companies in identifying low-carbon products. To calculate this metric, a company should divide the R&D budget allocated to low-carbon products and services by total revenue for the reporting period and express it as a percentage. Organizations can choose to select unknown if the R&D expenditure is not easily mapped to low carbon products and services. Question E8 aims to get a better sense of what the organization has done to support climate adaptation and resilience. Adaptation refers to changes in processes, practices, and structures to moderate potential damages or to benefit from opportunities associated with climate change. Corporate adaptation encompasses the set of actions companies can take on to determine their risk exposure, identify opportunities, and build resilience to climate change. Organizations should select all activities related to climate adaptation that apply. Organizations can also choose to select unknown if it is unclear which actions, if any, it has taken to support climate adaptation. E9 asks for the amount of renewable energy consumed during the reporting period. The indicator can be defined as the ratio of an entity's consumption of renewable energy to its total energy consumption during the reporting period. Types of renewable energy include, for example, solar energy, biomass, hydropower, geothermal energy, and ocean energy. This data can be found by collating bills from energy and fuel providers or from renewable energy certificates. Typically, this data is managed by an energy manager, facility manager, or general services administrator or accounting department. Question E10 refers again to low carbon products and services. It asks what percentage of a total revenue is being spent on low carbon products and follows a similar reporting format as the previously shown R&D question, E7. Examples of low carbon products and services include energy efficient appliances and lighting solutions, but also low carbon steel or cement manufactured without using fossil fuels. Additional questions in the performance section of the environmental section cover the topics of water, waste, air pollution, land use, and biodiversity. Only companies operating in certain sectors and subsectors, as identified in the UN Global Compact profile, are required to answer these questions. Each participating company is assigned to a sector in the UN Global Compact database based on the information provided by the company. Based on the sector, the system may automatically assign additionally environmental questions to the company. If the diversified other was selected by the company, this non-numbered question will appear in the COP questionnaire, asking the company to identify its top 3 sectors by revenue, which may prompt additional environmental questions. The guidebook includes a graphic that maps the connection between sectors and subsectors and the following environmental questions. This slide provides an overview of the additional questions that companies operating in certain sectors may have to answer. Each of these questions is asking for specific details on the topics of water, forest, and land use, air pollution, or waste. Water covers water withdrawal, consumption, and intensity. Forest and land use asks about sites owned, leased, or managed in or adjacent to protected areas, conversion of natural ecosystems, and ecosystem protection and restoration. Air pollution covers non-greenhouse gas air pollutant emissions. And finally, the waste questions address toxic waste generated, the hazardous waste ratio, and the use of single-use plastics. Calculation metrics and other guidance for answering these questions are based on existing frameworks and standards and can be found in our COP guidebook. Let's have a look on these questions. Questions E11 ask about water withdrawal and consumption within the reporting period. Water should be metered at each facility or business site. This indicator should be calculated at site level where feasible, to allow data collection within certain geographic and operational boundaries at a later stage. If such information is collected, it can be found in internal reporting systems and/or environmental accounting systems or environmental management systems, especially with regard to resource recycling quantities and costs. If such information is not collected, companies should note that they are providing estimates and include the calculations used in the space provided for additional information. Information collected in accounts payable based on water suppliers' bills may be used as a basis for estimating this indicator. This question also asks organizations to report the percentage of water withdrawn in regions with water stress. In order to create more comparable data, the UN Global Compact recommends computing water stress using the WRI Water Risk Atlas tool. To report this metric, companies should identify total water withdrawn from areas of high or extremely high water stress and divide the total water withdrawn from all sources. Or calculate the total water consumed in areas of high or extremely high water stress and divide by the total water consumed from all sources. Both measures should be reported as a percentage. Organizations can also select unknown for any metric that is not measured or not applicable if water is not a material topic for them. Companies that select not applicable will be asked to provide further information. Question E12 refers to water intensity of products in region with high or extremely high water stress. Water intensity can be reported as a ratio of water use divided by the unit of production. Per CDP guidelines, users can report the numerator as cubic meters or relevant units listed on the right, such as freshwater withdrawals, or total water consumption. For the denominator, users can report relevant units of production, also listed on the right, such as liters. In industries where there are a lot of different products, water intensity for the top 5 products should be reported. Recognizing the difficulty of measuring water intensity, we provide organizations the opportunity to align their reporting with CDP guidance within each of their sectors. As such, we encourage organizations that report this metric to provide further details about their calculation. E13 discusses company activity in key biodiversity areas, KBA. Operations in and around these areas indicate heightened risk of adverse impacts on biodiversity. Such operations also increase the risk of exposure to associated legal or reputational risk. Companies should report the total number of sites that share a border or fall within a protected area or key biodiversity area, and the total land area in hectares of these sites. Sites are defined as properties that are owned, leased, rented, or managed by the reporting company in or adjacent to protected areas and/or KBAs. Boundaries for protected areas can be identified either using the KBA database or a government-hosted database. Organizations can select unknown if this land use near protected site is not measured, or not applicable if land use is not a material topic for them. Companies that select not applicable will be asked to provide further information. Question E14 asks about the conversion of natural ecosystems due to company operations. Deforestation and conversion of land a company controls or manages not only has adverse impacts on the environment and communities, but can pose operational or reputational risks, for example, consumer boycotts or divestment policies. Therefore, it is important to demonstrate to stakeholders that your organization has a good understanding of the land resources it controls and/or manages. Companies may select unknown if owned, leased, or managed land was converted from natural ecosystems during the reporting period, but the amount of area is not known. Organizations can also select not applicable if this question is not material to them. Companies that select not applicable will be asked to provide further information. E15 focuses on ecosystem restoration, a beneficial way to reverse negative impacts and illustrate to stakeholders that your organization is committed and proactive toward environmental stewardship. Organizations are asked to provide details about which ecosystems are being restored. For projects that are underway, organizations are asked to provide the project areas in hectares. E16 requests data referring to non-greenhouse gas types of air pollution. Air pollution is defined as the presence of contaminant or pollutant substances in the air that do not disperse properly and that interfere with human health or welfare or produce other harmful environmental effects. When compiling the information required for the disclosure, the reporting organization shall select one of the following approaches for calculating significant air emissions: direct measurement of emissions, such as online analyzers, calculation based on site-specific data, calculation based on published emission factors, or an estimation. Companies should report total emissions across all sources in tons for each pollutant category, and any estimation should be noted in the space provided for additional information. Definitions of terms are located in the COP guidebook glossary. E17 requests the company's total weight of solid waste in metric tons generated during the reporting period. Total waste is the sum of the amounts of all mineral, non-mineral, and/or hazardous waste treated by any waste treatment technology. This excludes the amount that is treated either on-site or off-site through closed-loop recycling, reuse, or remanufacturing processes. For instance, the recycled, reused, or remanufactured waste materials returned to the processes of the reporting entity. Companies may select unknown if this information is not tracked, although this should be noted in the space provided. Organizations can also select not applicable if this question is not material to them. Companies that select not applicable will be asked to provide further information. Question E18 concerns hazardous waste generation. Please review the characteristics of hazardous waste on the right side of the slide. This list and further clarification is provided in the COP guidebook. The hazardous waste ratio should be reported as total hazardous waste generated divided by total solid waste generated, including hazardous waste. Companies may select unknown if this information is not tracked. Also, this should be noted in the space provided. Organizations can also select not applicable if this question is not material to them. Companies that select not applicable will be asked to provide further information. E19 asks about the organization's use of single-use plastics in metric tons. According to the World Economic Forum, metrics for reporting on single-use plastics have not yet been standardized. However, experimenting with measurement will help the company understand its exposure to an issue of high public concern, and disclosing the results and approach will help to advance understanding of the issue more widely. Under the grouping remediation and reporting, all participants will answer one question about additional activities implemented. As in the sections on human rights, labor, and anti-corruption, the last question of the environment section is open narrative format, where companies can provide further context and/or additional relevant information not covered in the previous questions, such as additional activities implemented or goals set. Thank you very much for your attention today. We will now be happy to answer any questions that you may have.